In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Welcome, friends, to Crime and Punishment, a legal podcast, the official podcast of the Invictus Law Firm, PA. This is not a political program. We here at Crime and Punishment have absolutely no political leanings, no thought crime here, ladies and gentlemen. We just report the news, or in cases like today, we report on old news that's been memory holed. Specifically, today, we're going to talk about the trial of Ezra Pound, my favorite poet and yours, after, of course, maybe Homer. Ezra Pound, the American poet, was an expatriate who lived in Italy, and they happened to be fascist at the time. Ezra Pound was there as an American. He did not appreciate the war being waged in Europe, thought America had no business there, and spoke about it on the radio. Well, speaking about it on the radio, dissenting against your government's decision to invade the very country you are living in at the time, that is effectively treason. I've not posted the newsletter yet because I'm not done writing it, but it will be posted after this program. That's not the newsletter, that's the YouTube channel. So I've got the newsletter here for you to subscribe. I'm posting it in the chat right now. All right, we're also going to post the viral style, and I'm doing this in a painstaking manner because I took the trouble to get it out there before we went live, for once. So now you have it. Ulfric says, "Hail Augustus, hope the week is going well for you, friend." Hail Ulfric. It is going well, but it's only Tuesday, so it's anybody's guess how this week is going to go. I want to hopefully finish our discussion about Ezra Pound today because I've got so many other good things. I've got Carl Schmitt's book on dictatorship, for one. October 30th is the Feast of Christ the King. I'm going to do an episode that day. Not that day, of course. That's a Sunday. Either the 25th or November 1st. Probably not November 1st. So it's probably going to be October 25th, right? The lead up to the feast. I have a brief, it's more like an essay that I wanted to read through, talking about natural law and the establishment of the social reign of Christ the King. It's a whole different perspective on law. There's also a book by a certain professor on natural law and the same subject. I'm debating whether to read that book. I mean, on air. Obviously, I've read the book, but we'll see. I think these are fascinating things, but I think the next thing we're going to do is probably some Carl Schmitt, dictatorship. That'll be fun. In the meantime, let's talk about Ezra Pound. New York Herald Tribune, November 28th, 1945. Washington, November 27th, 1945. Unkempt and clad in GI hand-me-downs, Ezra Pound, 60-year-old American poet accused of treason, stood mute today during arraignment before a federal district court here, shuffling from one foot to the other while a defense attorney requested that he be released from the District of Columbia jail because he suffers claustrophobia and may lose his sanity if he remains imprisoned. Let's skip over the smug tone with which this journalist writes. So arraignment is where you go in and you plead guilty or not guilty. You'll remember from the last episode, last week's episode we talked about the Oath Keepers and their sedition trial. The week before that was part one of this program about Ezra Pound. And you may recall that we read that motion to the judge written by Ezra Pound's defense attorney, asking that he be released. And I said, spoiler alert, he's not getting released. Let's continue with the article, though. Chief Justice Bolitho Laws remanded Pound to Gallinger Hospital for examination. What a name for a judge. Your last name is Laws? Incredible. The defense attorney, Julian Cornell, who, by the way, wrote this book that we're reading, which is called The Trial of Ezra Pound. The defense attorney, Julian Cornell of New York, said Pound lacked sufficient judgment at present to make any plea before the court and asked Justice Laws to enter a plea of not guilty for him. Mr. Cornell told the court that Pound was unable to enter a plea as the result of claustrophobia ever since imprisonment by the army at Pisa, Italy, where he was held 7 months incommunicado in a cage made of air landing strips welded together. Mr. Cornell said the stay at the District of Columbia jail had become unbearable for the poet after a jailbreak caused authorities to keep all prisoners in their cells without customary exercise walks. Pound was imprisoned early in May this year and was not removed from Pisa until Saturday, when he was flown to Washington for arraignment and trial. Prosecuting attorneys had expected the defendant to request an early trial. It's a complete surprise, Isaiah Matlack, Justice Department counsel in charge of the government case, declared. Pound, by today's court order, will be held at Gallinger Hospital for examination and observation and treatment if necessary until December 14th. So, let's talk about the procedure there. I had a friend, actually, who is probably listening to this program, who reached out to me probably a couple weeks ago now, just outraged that this woman in a case that he knows about, this woman has skirted the law because she keeps getting evaluated for competency, and she keeps, pretending that she's crazy, and they just keep delaying the trial. This has been going on forever. This is not a modern phenomenon, and not saying that Pound was pretending to be crazy, but the issue of competency is a very long-standing matter in American and English courts. Possibly Europe, but I don't know. No expert there. So, in our system of government, if you are insane, you cannot be taken to trial. There's an old legal maxim that says that madness is its own punishment. So for one, it's against our system of justice, against all our instincts as Westerners, as a Christian civilization, is against everything inside of us to condemn somebody and punish them if they are insane, especially if they don't know what's going on, because that's really the legal matter here. Do you understand what is going on? Do you understand? There are two different sides of this. Do you understand what's going on in this trial here, so that we can proceed and find out whether you did this or not, and then punish you if you did? And then the other half is, did you understand what was right and wrong at the time this happened, what you're accused of? So what we're talking about for Ezra Pound is the former. Are you competent to proceed to trial? Do you understand the proceedings against you? Do you understand the evidence against you? Do you understand the role of the judge? Do you understand the role of your own attorney? What does your attorney do? Do you understand the role of the government attorney, Mr. Matlack? Do you understand what he does and why he's here in these proceedings? So Mr. Cornell, Ezra Pound's attorney, said he doesn't understand any of this. He is so wigged out because he's a severe claustrophobic, being held in solitary confinement for indefinite periods of time with no exercise, no walks, no contact with the outside world. He's so wigged out now that he is not competent to proceed to trial. He does not know what's going on, and he can't, crucial point here, he cannot help Mr. Cornell in assisting in his own defense. That's against all our sense of justice, that you could proceed to trial against a man who cannot competently assist his own attorney and defend himself, right? Just like it's against all our sense of justice to, stab somebody in the throat when they are unarmed, or to shoot an unarmed man or an unarmed prisoner, right? It's just wrong. And it's something ingrained in all our conscience. You don't take a club to somebody who's unarmed, or a knife or a gun. You want it to be an even match, right? Likewise, in law, you don't want to bring down all the machinery of the federal government, the media, all the system, against a man who doesn't even understand what's happening to him, or doesn't understand the role of the government in prosecuting him, and can't even help his lawyer to find witnesses or, establish his alibi or whatever his defense is going to be. It's just wrong. So, in a case like that, you ask the judge to have the guy evaluated by a psychiatrist. So a psychiatrist comes in and he evaluates the person, your client, the defendant. In this case, again, we're only talking about competency to proceed. So he comes in and decides, does he understand what's going on, so on and so forth, everything we just talked about. And if he thinks that the guy is competent, or worse, if he thinks the guy is malingering, if he thinks he's pretending to be insane, then he's going to tell the judge that. The judge is going to proceed. If the guy, this happens sometimes, if the guy refuses to cooperate with the doctor, for whatever reason, maybe he thinks the whole thing's a conspiracy, maybe he thinks the doctor's out to get him, maybe he doesn't like the way the doctor looks, maybe he just wants to stall for time, doesn't want the case to proceed at all, so he's just going to sit there and not say a word. I don't know about other places, but at least in Florida, the judge can still proceed. Can say, oh, well, you don't want to talk to the doctor? Too bad. Now you're confident. I'm not going to play that game. So, in this case, the judge is going to order Ezra Pound to submit to an evaluation. We'll get to that in 1 second. Let's read the final paragraph of this article first from the New York Herald Tribune. He was reindicted yesterday by a federal grand jury for 19 overt acts of treason between December 11th, 1941 and May 3rd, 1945, including charges that he gave aid and comfort to the enemy by accepting employment for the Italian fascist government as a radio propagandist and for counseling enemy officials in operations against the United States. He was originally indicted in July 1943. So we're talking almost 2.5 years later is when this article comes out, after his original indictment. December 11th, 1941 is when these overt acts of treason began. Amazingly, that is 4 days after, by my account, Pearl Harbor. So, I don't know if we're going to get to the transcripts of this, but like I said, Ezra Pound he was anti-war. Didn't think the United States has had any legitimate national interest in being in World War II. Brian says, good afternoon from the West. Good afternoon, Brian, from the East. So that's the end of that article. Then there's a letter. We read a couple letters last time. Chapter 4 is about the medical examination of Ezra Pound. I'm sure you don't want to hear all about that. Let's go straight to the trial. Chapter 5. Because Judge Laws orders Pound transferred to St. Elizabeth's Hospital, right? So he first orders him to, Gallinger Hospital? He orders him there for the evaluation, for observation, to see whether he is actually incompetent or insane or whatever the case may be. See if he's malingering, see if he's good to go, and if he's not good to go, if he is incompetent, then it is their job to make him competent. Nowadays, largely by medication. I don't know about back then. In that case, maybe by, letting him out of a cage, at least for an hour a day, not keeping him in solitary confinement, maybe allowing him to speak to his family. Come on. Like, there are some things that are so obvious that you can't really blame an inmate for thinking there's a conspiracy against him. A lot of attorneys, and I've been in this position myself, probably on both sides, but a lot of attorneys will think, this guy's crazy. He thinks everybody's out to get him. And they're saying this while they're at Red Lobster, with their other attorney friends, laughing it up. This guy's crazy. He thinks that the sheriff's office and the judge are all in cahoots. He thinks that there's like some massive conspiracy against him and the judge is out to get him. Like, what do you even do with a guy like that? while they're eating their biscuits, drinking their cocktails, having a good old time. Meanwhile, he's in isolation right now, thinking he's dying, right? Everybody's abandoned him. People have a very, and this is just a human thing, not a lawyer thing, people have a very hard time putting themselves in other people's shoes. And for the normal person, it's, I want to say, next to impossible to comprehend maximum security isolation and everything that goes along with that. Anyway, where were we? When Judge Laws ordered Pound transferred to St. Elizabeth's Hospital under the federal statute which requires the confinement in that institution of all federal prisoners under indictment who are found to be unable to stand trial because of lack of competence or understanding, he was placed in the prison ward, known as Howard Hall, a grim building with locked doors and gratings at the windows. Outside the building there was an exercise yard surrounded by a very high wall. Like the other prisoners, Pound was allowed a brief daily period of exercise in the yard, but at other times was locked in. He found the confinement intolerable. The claustrophobia which had come over him in Pisa now returned. You were probably here last week when you heard us read the letter from these political prisoners in the D.C. What's the political term for a detention camp? Wherever they're being held in D.C. We read this letter where they were complaining about the conditions at the jail in D.C. And you can't blame them for thinking, again, that everybody's out to get them, that this is 100% political, that they're being targeted for their political beliefs, because in a sense, they absolutely are. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. However, these conditions are universal. And it's not just because it's 2022 in Biden's America, and we love Biden. We have no political opinions on this program. And it's not because they're Republican in a democratically held city. It's not because of anything political. These are the conditions in all the jails all over the country. You don't get your calorie intake because they want you to pay for commissary. They have a business relationship with the commissary people. In every jail in the country, in every prison in the country, it is a for-profit industry, a multi-billion-dollar industry, the prison system in America. It's not because you supported Donald Trump. This is every black person who voted for Obama as well, and every black person who had their rights taken away to vote before Obama even ran for president. It's everybody in the jail. Has nothing to do with your politics. And it's not just now. This is not something where, well, we used to have great prisons in America. They used to be so humane. You see the same exact conditions when we're talking about Ezra Pound. Now, there is a difference in that, he's locked in this place surrounded by a very high wall. That sounds like heaven compared to the places I've been. It sounds amazing. What's up, Anthony? What's up, Ashley Johnson? I see y'all in there. The modern jail is not like you see on TV where you got bars, right? Like, think of Dark Knight Rises when they go to that prison, Blackgate, I think it's called, and guys are like hooting and hollering at Anne Hathaway, and they're like holding their hands out of the bars. No. In jail, prison, today, your door is like a blast door. It's not opening. There are no bars. There's no getting through there. There's no mail slot. There's a blast door, and there's a little rectangle that you can look out of that's hard plastic. You got to yell through a crack in the door. Like, there's no passing things through there. You are on lockdown when that door is closed. Completely different situation. So it's even more inhuman now. Anyway, so he's got severe claustrophobia that came over him in Pisa. It's returned now in Washington, D.C. That's the way it is, And it's not because Ezra Pound was a fascist. It's not because he supported Mussolini. It's not because he said America should not be involved in this war. It's because he's in jail, and this is how the American jails are. Perhaps because of the publicity which the case was receiving, the Department of Justice was not content to allow Pound to remain at St. Elizabeth's indefinitely without a public trial. What a loaded sentence that is. First sentence in the second paragraph of this chapter, and you're already taking digs at the Department of Justice. Can you imagine this book, which was, let's see, 1966, but we're talking about the trial, which is in 1945. Can you imagine he's saying that the Department of Justice is politically motivated? It's making decisions on what to do in their cases based on the public outcry, based on what the media is saying about Ezra Pound. Unimaginable. I thought this was something that started with President Biden. Lo and behold, this is the American way, baby. The Department of Justice has always been a political entity. The law has always been inseparable from politics. I hope that everybody who listens to this program is disabused by now of this false notion that there is some abstract rule of law that is objective and that reasonable men can attain through study and reflection. Like, garbage. Get out of here with that. Laws are made by men. Laws are political. Laws are issued and enforced according to political necessity. Period. So, the Department of Justice was not content to allow Pound to remain at the hospital indefinitely without a public trial. They wanted to move it forward. They wanted to get this thing moving, because otherwise they're... what's the politically correct term? The people who control the media, the newspapers, I don't know who they were back then, but they don't want them criticizing them, right? So they want to move this thing along speedily. There was continuing clamor in the newspapers about Pound. By whom, I can't imagine. There was continuing clamor in the newspapers about Pound. Many people claimed that he was merely a fascist and no more insane than any other fascist. I believe that much of the bitterness against him derived from the anti-Semitic tone of some of the broadcasts from Rome. Wait, what does that have to do with anything? Why would the newspapers be upset about him being anti-Semitic in another country? Anti-Semitic tone. He's not even saying that the broadcasts were anti-Semitic. They just had an anti-Semitic tone in Rome. Anyway, there was one newspaper reporter, Albert Deutsch, what a name, who took a special interest in the matter and wrote at length in the newspapers in an unfriendly vein. He apparently had had considerable experience in psychiatric matters, of course he did, and tried to convince everyone that Pound was sane and fit to be tried. He even suggested to Matlack that he should adopt the line of argument that Pound's insanity was no different from the insanity of other war criminals and traitors. So, the Department of Justice, even the specific U.S. attorney, Mr. Matlack, is getting pressure from a Mr. Deutsch, a journalist, and all the newspapers. I don't know what ethnicity that is, but somebody's putting pressure on the U.S. attorney. Somebody's putting pressure on the Department of Justice to engage in a political trial against a man who is being evaluated for competency. This was 1945. This is nothing new. This was the state of affairs when the Department of Justice requested Judge Laws to order a jury trial. So, the media and this Mr. Deutsch have put such pressure on Mr. Matlack, the U.S. Attorney, and on the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice requested a jury trial immediately. This guy's faking it. He's no more insane than anyone else who would be a fascist. As all fascists are insane, they're not liberals. Obviously, they're crazy. I, that is, Mr. Cornell, had no objection, and the judge so ordered the jury trial. This development was reported to Mrs. Pound in the following letter. So, dear Mrs. Pound, I have your letter of December 8th. Your husband's address is St. Elizabeth's Hospital, Washington, D.C. You can write to him directly in the future. Meanwhile, I have given him your message. There is to be a formal hearing next week on the question of whether his mental condition would permit him to stand trial. The result is a foregone conclusion, since all the doctors are in agreement that he is in no condition to be tried and requires hospital treatment. However, this proceeding is a formality which the law requires. I have learned from questioning the doctors that they do not anticipate any substantial change in your husband's condition, and also that they do not think he needs to remain very long in a hospital. I expect, therefore, that after a few months the case will be dropped and he will be set free. You need not be alarmed about the report on your husband's mental condition. While no doubt his difficulties were aggravated by the ordeal of his imprisonment, he has been resting comfortably in a hospital for some time now, and I believe that his condition is just about normal. However, a state which would no doubt appear to you to be normal is defined by the doctors as paranoid in character, to an extent which impairs your husband's judgment of his predicament and renders him unable to properly defend himself. While the doctors are agreed that he is to this extent mentally abnormal, I feel quite sure that you will find when you see him again that he is his usual self, and the mental aberrations which the doctors have found are not anything new or unusual, but are chronic, and would pass entirely unnoticed by one like yourself who has lived close to him for a number of years. In fact, I think it may be fairly said that any man of his genius would be regarded by a psychiatrist as abnormal. In other words, yeah, your husband was going through some stuff, and it was bad. And yeah, he's crazy, but I think he's always been crazy. He's a genius, and everybody's going to say he's crazy. But he's not, doing too bad. I am sorry that you may have been startled and alarmed by reports of your husband's condition, and I hope that you can understand that he may appear to be a stranger in quite a different way from the way in which he appears to you. Those who have known him for some time, such as James Laughlin, tell me that he is very much his old self, and I feel confident, therefore, that you need have no worry. On the other hand, you may rejoice that we have found a way to get around the difficulties presented by the indictment against him, and that these difficulties are all but surmounted. Sincerely yours, Julian Cornell. What a great letter. It's a shame lawyers don't have time to write letters like that anymore. I'm lucky if I have time to write emails, Anyway, the trial itself was well publicized and well attended. Laughlin was there. That's the guy he just mentioned in the letter. So was Albert Deutsch, the newspaper man. I have mentioned in a large number of other reporters. Newspaper man. That's who owns the media. The newspaper man. Anyway. So we have the sanity hearing. So let's just skip that, shall we? Habeas corpus. Let's see what else we have here. After habeas corpus, we've got, this is a rather long chapter. St. Elizabeth's, that's the hospital. We do have the transcripts of his broadcasts. That might be fun. Return to Italy. Text of the indictment. Oh, that's a good one. We didn't read that yet, did we? We should read the indictment. Let's see what he's actually accused of. In the District Court of the United States for the District of Columbia, October term, AD 1945. So that means we are now at the anniversary. And his birthday is coming up, October 30th. Funny enough, the Feast of Christ the King this year, which we were just talking about at the outset of this program. So, the grand jurors for the United States of America duly impaneled and sworn in the District Court of the United States for the District of Columbia and inquiring for that district upon their oath present. 1. That Ezra Pound, the defendant herein, was born at Haley, Idaho, October 30th, 1885, and that he has been at all times herein mentioned and is now a citizen of the United States of America and a person owing allegiance to the United States of America. Pay attention, dear listener. because this could be the beginning of your indictment soon enough. 2, that the defendant, Ezra Pound, at Rome, Italy, and other places within the Kingdom of Italy and outside the jurisdiction of any particular state or district, but within the jurisdiction of the United States and of this court, the District of Columbia being the district in which he is found and into which he was first brought, continuously and at all times, beginning on the 11th day of December 1941 and continuing thereafter to and including the 3rd day of May 1945, under the circumstances and conditions in the manner and in the means hereinafter set forth, then and there being a citizen of the United States and a person owing allegiance to the United States, in violation of said duty of allegiance, knowingly, intentionally, willfully, unlawfully, feloniously, traitorously, and treasonably did adhere to the enemies of the United States, to wit, the Kingdom of Italy and the military allies of said Kingdom of Italy, with which the United States at all times since December 11th, 1941, and during the times set forth in this indictment, have been at war, giving to the said enemies of the United States aid and comfort within the United States and elsewhere. That is to say. So, that's a lot of legalese. Basically, defendant Ezra Pound in Italy was under the jurisdiction of this court in D.C., and from 11 December 1941 to 3 May 1945, owed allegiance to the United States as a citizen of the United States, but he gave aid and comfort to Italy and its allies, those rotten Nazis and the Japanese. So, now that is to say, 3, that the aforesaid adherence of the said defendant, Ezra Pound, to the Kingdom of Italy and its military allies, and the giving of aid and comfort by the said defendant, Ezra Pound, to the aforesaid enemies of the United States during the time aforesaid consisted, A, and here we're going to detail what exactly he did wrong. A, of accepting employment from the Kingdom of Italy in the capacity of a radio propagandist, and in the performance of the duties thereof, which involved the composition of texts, speeches, talks, and announcements, and the recording thereof for subsequent broadcast over shortwave radio on wavelengths audible in the United States and elsewhere, on ordinary commercial radio receiving sets having shortwave reception facilities. And B, so A is he was saying things on the radio. He gave radio broadcasts like you're listening to right now. Right? Which is why we have no political opinions. We're not giving aid and comfort to anybody. We're just reading legal news, giving legal commentary, right? He wrote texts, speeches, talks, and announcements. He recorded these things for the radio. That was giving aid and comfort to the enemy. That was treason. Think about that. This thing on the internet machine where right-wingers, conservatives, Trumpsters, white nationalists, actual white supremacists, actual neo-Nazis, neo-fascists, anybody right of Karl Marx, you've all got a podcast. You've all been on podcasts. I'm not going to name them, but they're either you got a Telegram channel, you got a YouTube channel if you haven't been kicked off yet, which we haven't, but that's because we're not political. You've got Odyssey, you've got, whatever you've got. You're broadcasting these things. Maybe you got a Twitter audio room, which I've been meaning to set up. And if you do have one, please let me know how to do it. You've got that. You've got your video live streaming. Maybe you're live streaming from Facebook. Or maybe you've gone full professional and you're live streaming from LinkedIn. Does it ever cross your mind that that could be treason? Do you ever make a broadcast on Odyssey criticizing the American government for its foreign policy and saying, actually, why wouldn't Russia invade Ukraine? look at X, Y, and Z, which we're not going to get into because we are not supporting the Russian invasion. We take no political stances on this program. But if you were to say that on your own Odyssey program, independent of us, and you went out on that limb, God forbid, would it cross your mind this is treason against the United States government? And after this war between Russia and Ukraine, assuming we get involved, after this war, I'm going to be prosecuted for treason for saying this on the radio or on YouTube or on Telegram or wherever you're saying it. That is what Ezra Pound is on trial for. Now, you might think, well, it's completely different because he was in Italy. Would it be? Would it be different if you were criticizing the American government while in Russia, on Russian radio, or on Russian YouTube, whatever their Facebook is called, I forget? Would it be different if you were over there doing it, or if you were here, say in Washington, D.C., right next to Biden, broadcasting, criticizing American foreign policy during a war? What would the difference be if you were in Russia or in D.C., right? In Moscow or in D.C.? So what would the difference be if Ezra Pound were in D.C. making these radio broadcasts? Telling American soldiers, you should not be fighting this war. We'd have no business in Italy. Would it not be treason then? So we're all up in arms about, oh, the ADL is blacklisting us and PayPal is kicking everybody off and we can't fundraise and we're getting kicked off YouTube and Facebook and so on and so forth, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's been going on forever. This is not something new. What you have to say is treason. There's a long American tradition of treason, beginning, by the way, with its founding. The entire history of America, everybody's accusing everybody of treason, right? My favorite treason trial is the trial of Aaron Burr. And one of my favorite stories is the story of the duel between Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton. You go to the Library of Congress and you see the Jefferson collection where he donated his whole library. You'll see he's got a copy of the book, The Treason Trial of Aaron Burr, which is fascinating because they were all scheming to put that guy away. All those guys hated Burr. He was like a Trump figure, right? Just larger than life. Could take on the entire government and nobody could stop him. He's going to raise up all these knights and invade Mexico and make his own kingdom. I mean, what a guy. And of course, people like Jefferson hated him. He's not playing their bureaucratic game. He's not a revolutionary like them, not a real Republican like them. So they instituted their machinations. And, of course, Jefferson followed it very closely, bought the books when the trial was done, all right? And the guy walked. So it's nothing new. This is these people, these merchants and Freemasons overthrew the monarchy, committed high treason to establish the United States of America, and then accused everybody of treason when they didn't like their government. Or when they would say, let's go invade Mexico, or let's go do something out west, away from the American government. Let's get out of here. No, my dude, that is treason, and we will hang you for it. And those were the very traitors themselves who were accusing other people of treason. Just like the finger-pointing Spider-Man meme, right? Just like we talked about last week. No, we can invoke the Insurrection Act. You can't do that. No, we invoke the Insurrection Act. You can't do that. Well, I'm the present president. Well, no, you're the former president. You can't do that, right? Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Only we have the right to invoke the Insurrection Act. Only we are the true patriots, and you are the traitors. We will try you for treason. Again, there is no abstract rule of law here. It is all a political question. And law is the enforcement mechanism of your political power or your drive for political power, for its attainment. So what is happening to the Oath Keepers right now, what they're trying to do to Trump right now, It's as old as the trial of Aaron Burr. It's as old as the trial of Ezra Pound. Doesn't matter if you're actually fascist. It doesn't matter if you are in Rome or if you are in D.C. or if you are in California or South Carolina or Florida. Doesn't matter where you are. You are against progress. Aaron Burr was against the progress of the federal government in those days, the progress of the Jeffersonian America. Ezra Pound was against the progress of Roosevelt's America, of the onslaught, or excuse me, the onward march of the Rothschilds and the Sassoons. How dare he? He must be tried for treason, and if he's incompetent to stand trial, oh well. He's no more insane than anyone else who would be a fascist and support those fascists. They're all insane. Try him anyway. I went off on such a tangent, I forgot where I even was in this book. Oh, right, we were reading the indictment. Excuse me. So, A, in the specifics of what he did, he was a radio propagandist. So, look at yourselves and look at your own podcast and see, could you be charged with treason for this when all this is said and done? Because the answer is probably. Not us, though. We don't talk about politics. B, subsection B, of counseling and aiding the Kingdom of Italy and its military allies, and proposing and advocating to the officials of the government and the Kingdom of Italy ideas and thoughts, as well as methods by which such ideas and thoughts could be disseminated, which the said defendant Ezra Pound believed suitable and useful to the Kingdom of Italy for propaganda purposes and the prosecution of said war. He was literally charged with thought crime. Subsection B is he gave these officials ideas and thoughts. And furthermore, he gave them ideas and thoughts on how to disseminate those ideas and thoughts. God forbid that the aforesaid activities of the said defendant, Ezra Pound, were intended to persuade citizens and residents of the United States to decline to support the United States in the conduct of the said war, to weaken or destroy confidence in the government of the United States and in the integrity and loyalty of the allies of the United States, and to further bind together and increase the morale of the subjects of the Kingdom of Italy in support of the prosecution of the said war by the Kingdom of Italy and its military allies. Could you imagine an indictment like this by, say, the George W. Bush administration? Could you imagine a liberal journalist in Iraq, let's say, a leftist journalist is in Iraq during the Iraq War, and after the Iraq War is over, well, does it ever end? After whatever milestone you want to talk about, mission accomplished, right? George W. Bush gets his fighter jacket on, he says, mission accomplished. Now we're going to take all these commies to court. And somebody in the Department of Justice under George W. Bush indicts a journalist who was there in Iraq and says, this liberal journalist engaged in activities intended to persuade citizens and residents of the United States to decline to support the United States in the invasion of Iraq, to weaken or destroy confidence in the George W. Bush administration, the government of the United States, and in the integrity and loyalty of all the allies of the United States, including the Kurds or whoever we teamed up with, Saudi Arabia. How dare you question their integrity? Now imagine back then, you're in the middle of World War II. Who were America's allies again? Britain, which as an Anglo-American myself, I shudder to think that I would cast blame upon the mother country. France, but the one no one likes talking about is the Soviet Union. We were allied with the force of communism on the face of the earth. How dare you question their integrity? How dare you question the integrity of our allies? To wit, the Soviet Union. How dare you say that we're waging the wrong war? How dare you tell American GIs, you shouldn't be fighting Italy, you fools. You should be fighting the Soviet Union. How dare you? Treason. Number 4. And the grand jurors aforesaid, upon their oath aforesaid, do further present that the said defendant Ezra Pound in the prosecution, performance, and execution of said treason, and of said unlawful, traitorous, and treasonable adhering and giving aid and comfort to the enemies of the United States, at the several times hereinafter set forth in the specifications hereof, being times when the United States were at war with the Kingdom of Italy and its military allies, unlawfully, feloniously, willfully, knowingly, traitorously, and treasonably, and with intent to adhere to and give aid and comfort to the said enemies, did do, perform, and commit certain overt and manifest acts. That is to say, now, he kindly took out all the details here and summarized it. So this is a note by the author. Here the indictment alleges overt acts consisting of broadcasts by Pound over a radio station of the Italian government at Rome, Italy on September 11th, 1942, December 10th, 1942, February 4th, 1943, March 19th, 1943, May 12th, 1943, May 14th, 1943, May 15th, 1943, and recording of broadcasts on various dates. And then he goes into number 16. So paragraphs 5 through 15, we're talking about those radio broadcasts. These are the radio broadcasts that got him charged with treason. Paragraph 16. On or about July 11th, 1942, the said defendant, Ezra Pound, for the purpose of giving aid and comfort to the Kingdom of Italy and its then allies in the war against the United States, accepted and received payment and remuneration in a sum of 700 lire from the Kingdom of Italy for compiling and recording messages, speeches, and talks for subsequent broadcasts in the United States and elsewhere from a radio station in Rome, Italy. So he got paid $700 to do this. That's paragraph 16. So not only did he do that, so here's a question for you. Do you get super chats on YouTube? Do you sell your t-shirts on Odyssey? Like, do you have ads? Are you getting paid to do these things? Now, maybe you're not getting paid by the Russian government, granted, but who knows? Maybe one of your donors is a Russian bot. Maybe you don't know where that money comes from, but somehow you're getting paid by the Russians. Paragraph 16, in your indictment, dear YouTuber, Odyssey caster, Facebooker, could be the money you received from whatever the payment app is down there. Paragraph 17. Between December 11th, 1941 and May 3rd, 1945, the said defendant Ezra Pound, for the purpose of giving aid and comfort to the Kingdom of Italy, etc., accepted and received payment and remuneration from the Kingdom of Italy for compiling and recording the messages, speaks, and talks on or about June 24th, and it goes on and on. So he received 350 lira for the June 24th, 1942 broadcast. He received money for the other broadcasts. Defendant, this is the closing, Ezra Pound, committed each and every one of these overt acts herein described for the purpose of and with the intent to adhere to and give aid and comfort to the Kingdom of Italy and its military allies, enemies of the United States, and the said defendant Ezra Pound committed each and every one of the said overt acts contrary to his duty of allegiance to the United States and to the form of the statute and Constitution in such case made and provided, and against the peace and dignity of the United States. That is the indictment. So, I don't see any questions in the chat here. We're having a slow chat day. I do see some rainbow flags and Ukrainian flags together. Is that what that is? I don't know what that flag is. I'm not hip to all these. Then we have a transcript of the trial. I won't bore you with that. I do remember one epic line. Something like, "I'm not a bloody fascist," which he mumbled under his breath. So this is a long transcript. We're not going to get into this. Instead, we'll end early today. That is The Trial of Ezra Pound, a book by Julian Cornell. I don't know how I found this book. Had it for years. Glad I could share it with you. And I hope everybody now is educated to the fact that being accused of treason for being against the present power is not some new outrage. America's not falling apart because of it. This is the way America is. This is the way America has always been since the Jeffersonians, which is to say, since the founding. Magnolia Madam says, I'm excited I caught you live. Right back at you, madam. Thank you for dropping in. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Next week, if we don't talk about legal news, we will talk about Carl Schmitt's book, Dictatorship. Till then.